So without further ado, I'm going to leave him to you and look forward to it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here on your lunch hour. Yes, we can call for him. Thanks for giving me some lunchtime. My name's Justin, and today I want to talk about making dreams come true and research. So today we're talking about how to party like a scholar. My name's Justin. As he said, I'm a gem cutter. Last year, or I guess 2 years ago, I wrote a book about gem cutting, that one. I run a faceting school, gem cutting school called Faceting Apprentice. And this year, my big project has been to write a new book that's totally unlike this one, which is more of a design book. I want to write a book about how the world of gem cutting started in America. So that's kind of my dream of the post-pandemic life. During the pandemic, I was locked at home, like I'm sure all of you guys were, and I started to come up with this idea. I've been doing this research for a bunch of years on just gem cutting history in general around the world, and I got kind of hooked into the American story, and I was like, okay, let me just sidetrack for a minute, and we're going to focus on this one story here. And so I spent the whole of 2021 doing this, basically just going through books that I had, going through anything that I could get online. Keep in mind, I'm in Bangkok, so it's not very easy to get, I don't have access to this wonderful place. So I'm just doing whatever I can there to do as much research as possible. So when I do a big research project like this, the way that I like to keep organized is I use PowerPoint, because I have a lot of visual stuff that I need to keep track of too. So for me, PowerPoint just works. And so by the end of a year ago, I had already 500 bits of evidence, 500 slides in my PowerPoint. So as soon as the travel restrictions ended, I was like, okay, I need to go deeper, right? Like, I can only do so much from research online because it's not all there. There's a lot of old stuff. GIA has a lot of awesome stuff that they've been digitizing, but it's not all there. Even if I had all the books in America, it's still not all there because most of the stuff that I'm looking for has never been written down, or at least never been published. It's in some newsletter that some club put out in 1946 or whatever. And so as soon as the travel restrictions ended, I was like, we need to get out. We need to see what's going on out there. And I thought, okay, there's only really one good way to do this. There's only one approach that I can take. And this is the dream of maybe all students out there who are just tired of school. And that was to do a road trip. So I've been on a road trip now for 13 months, or 12 months. It's going to be 13 months. So here's my idea. Here's my plan. Pioneering the American Faceting Movement. That's the book. So I want to look at how did the gem cutting community start in America. I want to look at the technological advances that happened over the last 100 and some years. And I want to collect books and some of these machines along the way to help me do the research when I get home. Because all of this for the whole last year has just been research. I'm just collecting data, taking photos, scanning books, spending lots and lots of days at libraries and museums. And when I finally get home, the fun part is sort of over and the hard part begins. That's when the stress comes in, where I have to take all of this stuff that I've collected and actually read it all and collate it and write a book. So here's how the year looked. I've been, as I said, on the road for a year. I drove over 30,000 miles in the last year. I spent almost $60,000 doing this project. So this is really crazy. For me, this is crazy. This is out of my normal world of budget, but I figured out how to do it. And so this was, as I said, my dream. I've been interviewing gem cutters all along the way. So this is one of the ways that I wanted to do my research. Because as I said, a lot of this stuff has never been written down, but there's an oral tradition. So I've been meeting gem cutters, and you can see where I've been really all around. And from here, I'm going to go to Tucson, to Denver, to Missouri, and back to Chicago. So I still have a bit of, I still have another month to go, and still more interviews to do. So I've filmed 47 hours of interviews so far. And I have one even after this talk. I'm going to go down to San Diego and do another one. So I've been collecting books. I've collected 33 faceting machines just this year. So now I have 100, which is ridiculous. And I've given 18 talks. This is talk number 18 of the last year. So I wanted to kind of talk about this a little bit. This is just my introduction. So I wanted to kind of give you guys some highlights to talk about how does one do such research? Because this is, I don't know if it's an eccentric research project, but I think that it is, because I don't know anyone else that has literally traveled across the whole world for a year just to do such a niche thing. But that's what I did. That's what I wanted to do. So here's some of the stuff that we saw, and here's some of the places that we went. So we went up to Maine. This was my place that I was really, really dreaming about. It was Maine. And we made some really big discoveries. You can see the whole top row, we found the oldest faceting machine in America. So this is 1890 or so, and nobody really knows that this is there. Like the Historical Society in Maine knew that it was there, but they don't really know what it is. People in Maine don't really know what it is. I've been researching this dude for the last year, as I said, so when I got there and discovered that it was actually there, I was pretty psyched. Then we found a bunch more machines at various places. These are at the Maine Gem Museum. And then this is a very rare faceting machine from the 1920s that's been sitting in the basement of Cross Jewelers since the 1930s when their grandfather died. They put all of his machines in the basement and they never opened the box again. And then I came there and I said, hey, I heard that you guys have these things. And they said, oh, let's get them out and see what it is. And they had no idea what it was. They didn't even know how it worked or anything. I pulled it all out and I put it all back together and said, hey, this is how it works, and this is what it does, and blah, blah, blah. And really was able to, between finding these three eras of machines, so this is 1890s, 1920s, 1930s, but they're all in the same lineage. So just already the trip was off to a great start. We're finding things that have never been documented. And then of course, we're checking out the local museums, checking out the local gem, the historical stuff, finding pictures. This is the guy that made that machine. So there's an awesome picture of him with A.C. Hamlin with a giant piece of tourmaline. So we're basically just going through, and I found so much information in Maine. Like, the Historical Society had so much stuff that was not online. The library had so much stuff, the Lapidary Club, the Mineral Museum, between all of them, and just people's private collections. I found so much stuff in Maine. That was just the first state. So you can just imagine this trip's gonna be crazy. So we go down to the New York, Philadelphia area. Of course, if you're there, you have to go to the Met. There's so much awesome jewelry there. That's probably one of the best museums in the States to see gems and see old jewelry. Now, this stuff isn't really related to my personal project because this is too old, but still, it's always cool to check it out. And then, of course, there's a whole gem cutting industry in New York, so we got to talk to all the gem cutters down there. And then going over to Philadelphia has the oldest jewelers row in America. I don't know if you guys knew that. I didn't know that. I just showed up and they said, hey, did you know where you are? I said, no. But so we got to go through, we got to meet some of the cutters there, interview them, check out some old museums. So one of the things that I'm trying to do, besides just understand the gem cutting story, if I'm going to be able to tell the story properly, I have to understand the whole context of life, in the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s. I'm cutting off the book in the 1940s because if I do after that, I'll never finish the project. So, going into, I don't know if you can really see what this is, but it's full of artifacts from about the 1890s, 1900s of what was normal stuff in people's houses. And so this is like the kind of amazing museum that's just showing me more and more and more of what life was like. So I've been in like total immersion. I'm listening to music from the 1930s. I'm watching old movies from the 1930s. Of course, I'm collecting all these books and stuff from the 1930s. And then going here and actually seeing the artifacts, is just further putting me into this sort of time traveling state that I need to be in. So of course, libraries have been such a big part of this year, and I was really excited to go to the Library of Congress. Now, previously in my other travels for other researches, I've been to the National Library in London, I've been to the National Library in Wales, I've been to the National Library of Paris. So I was really excited to see like the American National Library. I've never been there, I've never seen it, and it was awesome. You can see the reading room is it's majestic. It's full of really cool statues and architecture, and it's a beautiful place to sit and read books all day. And one of the books that I found there was this super rare book from 1935. I think there's only 2 copies left in the whole world because I've only ever found 2. That's the only one I've ever seen. So I was able to find a lot of cool stuff that I haven't been able to find there. And then of course, a couple blocks away is the Smithsonian. So we spent a couple days just exploring all the Smithsonians, and obviously they've got an awesome gem collection. They've got an awesome Munsteiner that I've always wanted to see. You know, all these recreations of what the mine looks like and putting everything together. You know, it's a respectable gem exhibition. So if you guys find yourself in DC, you must go. And then moving our way south, more discoveries. This is probably my second favorite thing that happened on this trip. So one of the main characters that I'm researching is a guy named J. Harry Howard. He was the dude that really helped kick all this stuff off in the 1930s. And he had his own fastening machine, and he was a gem cutter, and he was a writer, and all this stuff. And so for the last year and a half, I've been on this sort of research paper trail, trying to find this guy. I mean, obviously he's dead, but finding what happened to him, what happened to all of his stuff. And through a random guy that I met in Toronto, who's also a gem cutter researcher guy, he was able to help me figure out that the collection of this guy's stuff, Howard's last, stuff, is in this museum in Columbia, South Carolina. And so I'm talking to the curator on the email, and she's like, "Oh my God, I just I just documented all this stuff, but we have no idea what it is. Can you come and look at it and tell us?" Because they have 40 boxes of this guy's stuff. Rough, scraps, random crap out of his basement. But the crowning jewel, so we're going through these 40 boxes, and I keep finding pieces like this, and the stick, and the arm, and I start to recognize this stuff, because I've been looking at these pictures for like 2 years now, and I know what I'm looking for. So we start finding pieces of this puzzle, and I start putting them aside, and then we go over to this other area where this big metal base was, and I start putting the machine back together for the first time in 50 years. Nobody's ever seen it. They've never exhibited this. It's been in their archive basement since the 60s, whenever the dude died. So we put it back together. Me and the curator are sitting down in the basement vault of this museum, and we're putting it together, and suddenly there it is, and it looks exactly the way that it does in his book from 1935. And this is like, it's hard to describe the feeling of satisfaction in this moment when you've been dreaming of this thing. You've been fantasizing about it, and you're hoping it's there. You have no idea what you're going to find, and then you don't just get to find it on display in the museum. You get to find it in pieces and put it together for yourself. Like, this is awesome. And I had such a blast. Aside from that, they have 4,000 stones that the dude cut. So we went through for days going through these drawers and documenting, looking at the cuts, seeing what he was doing. You can see all this rough, looking up, doing close-up videos of some of his stones, just to try to, when I go home, I have to remember all this stuff. So the video has been really important to help me keep track. So from there, we went to a lot of places, but Chicago, that's home for me. That's where my parents live. So I get back to Chicago. I don't know if you guys know, but Chicago has the largest public library in the country. It's a square city block, 8 stories tall. It is an awesome library. That's a library that I always used to go to, when I was like a teenager and in my early 20s. It's huge. It's got awesome architecture. It's got tons of books and a beautiful atrium in the top. So lots of good old magazines and publications that I was scanning there. And then, of course, there's a really good lapidary art museum outside Chicago. So that was helpful in the research and just to do talks. And then collecting all of these treasures that I've been finding, and they're all stashed in my mom's basement right now. So she's got 40 fastening machines on a shelf that I had to put in because I've been getting so much stuff. Also, along the way, let me not get ahead of myself. I got a lot of books on this trip, but I think that's in another slide. So eventually we get to Montana. One of the things that I didn't say was we've been going to all the mining localities along the way. Because starting in Maine, that Maine is the tourmaline mine, right? Mount Micah. It's the oldest gemstone mine in the country. So we started off in Maine checking out that mine. So we just continued to go to the mines. We saw the Emerald Mine in South Carolina. We went to every mine in Montana. We got access, luckily, through all the miners. And so this is us in the Yogo mine. So we went into the mine, we're walking all around, we're finding all this old stuff from like the late 1800s. We even brought our dog in there. We had a little dog in a backpack going through the mine. But so we go to the, the archives, the I don't know what it's called, the Hall of Records or something. So in Helena, in this archive, they've got all of the files from this company called the American Gem Company. It's like maybe 8,000 letters, starting in like 1915 and going to 1930 something. So they were mining Montana sapphires way back in the early 1900s. And so I'm going through all these letters, and I find this letter here, and there's this little envelope on it. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. 7,000 letters, and suddenly there's this envelope. And so I open up the envelope, and it says mineral sample on it. And I'm like, could there really be something in here? I open up the envelope and pull out this little bit of cotton, and I open it up, and there is a Montana sapphire in there from like 1915 that's been cut into a perfect round circle with a little scoop out of it. It was a sample for a watch bearing that went to Switzerland, because they were sending all of the Montana sapphires from that moment to Switzerland to make watch bearings. So this is the sample. They sent it to Geneva, cut it, and sent it back to show. So this one needs a hole drilled in it, and then it's ready to go inside of your watch as the movement mechanism. So just ridiculous things that you again, not going to find that on the internet. You know what I mean? The people in the library don't even know that that's there. And I didn't tell them. I just put it back in and said, okay, this is a secret for another researcher another day. So one of the big helps that I had on this trip was talking to other researchers. And there's not really that many other people that are in this niche that I'm in. But there is this one guy up in Canada. He's outside of Toronto. He's about, 72. He's a gem cutter from way back. He used to be the president of the Lapidary Club in his town. And so I had been corresponding with this guy for a couple of years, and finally I got to go see him. And he has a collection of letters from gem cutters from the 1920s and 30s that he has collected, because he's been doing similar research, back in the 90s. So this is the guy that helped me figure out where that machine was in South Carolina. But when I went to see him, he gifted me all of these letters, which is exactly the kind of thing that I'm looking for, right? Because these letters, which have never been scanned, never been read by pretty much anybody, have all this personal information that one gem cutter is writing to another gem cutter about how do we saw a sapphire in 1928 or whatever, crazy stuff. Just like stuff that without it, you can't really understand the mindset of the people that I'm trying to write about. And then of course, going into every lapidary shop or gem shop I can, and this one this one had an amazing used book area, and I bought like 200 books that day. Like my trunk was full, and I was just like, okay, I guess I'm filling up the trunk again. So, and this has just been, how it's been the whole time. So I get up to Seattle, another important place. So I interviewed this gem cutter. This is the oldest cutter that I interviewed. He was 97, and I'm interviewing him, and he's like, I got a problem. And I'm like, I know, you're 97. But he's like, no, not that. And we're sitting in front of his huge library. So this dude's written a bunch of books about gem cutting back in the 80s and 90s, and a bunch of designs. And he's been really involved with the gem cutting community in America. And as I'm talking to him, he's like, I want you to take all of my books. I want to gift you my entire library, because I'm 97 and I'm really worried that when I die, my son's just gonna throw all this stuff away because he doesn't care. And I was like, I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, I'll come back in a year and get this, no problem. He's like, no, like right now, I want you to take it right now. So Seattle was, even though this seems like it's in the middle of the trip, this is day one, because I went to Seattle first to pick up this car. And so this is day one of my trip. This is my first interview. And you can see in the car, every seat is full of boxes. The front seat's full of boxes. The trunk's full of boxes. And none of my luggage or my wife or my dog are in the car. So I just immediately drove to like Staples and got a bunch of boxes and called my mom. And I was like, Mom, I'm really sorry, but 6 heavy boxes are going to be there in about a week. And I shipped 250 pounds of books to my mom's house that day. Because what else can I do, And a lot of these are handwritten. Like, he has a lot of books here, but a lot of these are the notes for his own books that he wrote. Design books, plus all of the letters that he had, and he has a ton of correspondences. So I'm just finding that this is literally the treasure that I came here to find. So we get to Portland, and Portland, like Maine, like South Carolina, this was one of those big places where I knew there's a big story in Portland, going back to the 20s and 30s. And I was really hoping for something special, and I was not disappointed. So there's a magazine called The Mineralogist, which started in like the early 30s and went for about 40, 50 years. And it was a really big deal for gem cutters in the early days. Like, this is how all the gem cutters would find out all the new stuff. And the guys that were making the magazine started one of the first lapidary clubs in America, which was in Portland. And the club still exists. So I contact them and I say, hey, do you guys have anything from your original founder back from 1937? And they're like, yeah, we don't really think so. We're not sure. Their club doesn't have a clubhouse. So any of the stuff that the club has is just in random people's basements, and they've been passing it down through the generations to save it. So they're like, we don't really know, but come over to this one person's house who's like the archivist, and we're going to pull out some boxes and just check it out and see what's in there. We pulled out these scrapbooks, 7 scrapbooks. I took 2,000 photos that day. 7 scrapbooks that were made by the dude that I'm, heavily researching, Dake, H.C. Dake. And so he's got all of these newspaper clippings, photos, random pamphlets that they made, original photographs from club outings. So they're going out into the mines in like where they're getting agates and sunstones and stuff. Photos of them with like Model T Fords, in their waistcoats and ties. And they're gem hunting out there, like they're rock hounding. And there's 7 books of this. So all of the club history, all the stuff that I was really hoping to find was just there, laid out for me in chronological order. It was incredible. There's another cutter who died, and all of his stuff got donated to the Gem Museum in Portland. So I was able to go through all of his files and scan everything, and they had a bunch of stones that I was taking photos of. So now when I get home, I've got photos of stones from all these different eras, going back to the 20s and 30s, 70s and 80s, and then going through all their books. So as you can see, the theme here is just collecting data, including even going and checking out the grave, because sometimes you just gotta go pay your respects, right? Like, if I'm gonna go say hi to Dake's scrapbook, so I gotta go say hi to Dake and his wife, in the mortuary. So that has kind of been a rundown of this crazy year. And so some thoughts that I've realized as I've been doing this, because this has been really an adventure. In my mind, this project for me, writing this book, is a lot like when you're just coming into the gem trade, right? Like, you're new, you don't know anything, you have to find your own way. Like, maybe you're just gonna go get a job and whatever. But that wasn't the path that worked for me. For me, I had to invent everything along the way. I had to start a company. I had to go to Bangkok. I had to do all this stuff. I had to network. I had to meet people. I had to almost run out of money and had to go home. But I didn't. In the last minute, I got a job. And like, the gem trade is so unique. You have to invent it for yourself. Whatever your skill set is, whatever your interest is. For me, it was cutting. So I've invented this whole world around me and become a pretty successful gem cutter. Now I'm writing this book, so I again have to invent this entire thing, this whole construction process of how do you build a book? How do you learn all of this stuff? And I don't know anything about this. I was never into history, but suddenly I'm like becoming an expert, at least about a very small little niche of history. There's so many people along the way that have helped me and that will help you guys, for whatever you end up doing. But if you're doing research, it's really important to just ask everyone that you can find. For me, I've been emailing everybody. Museum curators, can I come behind the scenes? Can I get an appointment? Librarians, can I come and go in the back and see what's back there? Can I go through all your boxes and files? Can I go in your basement? Can I go in the archives? And pretty much everybody this year has said yes, because they're into it. Like, if you're coming with passion, the people that work in those places also have that passion, and they're excited, even if they're not even interested in what you're doing. That excites them. So I've been meeting people and making a lot of really good friends. I've got some new mentors this year, and I've got a lot of good friends, new friends that I didn't know. So figure out what your thing is, what your dream is, what your passion is. For me, it's cutting history. I don't know why. It just fell into my lap, and I can't stop doing it. And it's working, like, all the doors are opening, and I've got this crazy collection of faceting machines, and now I've got this ridiculous collection of information about, a bunch of old dudes from the 1920s and 30s and old miners from the 1890s and everything else. So that is my 20-minute story, and thank you guys for listening. Thanks for having some lunch with me. So at the end of the trip, you've deserved a nap. Anybody have any questions real quick before you guys have to go?